Right now, in a shelter somewhere within 20 minutes of where you're sitting, there's a dog staring at a metal door, waiting for a name to be called. Not a walk, not a treat, a name. Because in most American shelters, once your time runs out, that's literally how it happens. A staff member walks down the row calling names off a clipboard. Every year, roughly 3.1 million dogs enter shelters across the United States. Some get adopted the same week, some wait 2 years, and some don't make it out at all. Today, we're going behind the kennel doors, the real intake process, the temperament tests, the myths about aggressive shelter dogs, and why the dog barking the loudest is often the safest bet in the building. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll never look at a shelter dog the same way again. And honestly, you might just want to adopt one. Let's start at the very beginning, the moment a dog walks through those doors. There are 3 main ways dogs end up in an American shelter. First, owner surrenders, people moving, losing their home, or just not being able to afford care anymore. Second, strays. Animal control picks them up wandering a neighborhood. And third, transfers. Dogs shipped in from overcrowded rural shelters, especially in the South, where intake numbers are brutal. Here's something most people don't know. The second a dog arrives, the clock starts on a legally mandated stray hold. In most states, that's somewhere between 3 and 5 days. It exists so an owner has a chance to claim their lost pet before the shelter can even consider adoption, or in worst cases, euthanasia. During that hold, the dog gets a full medical workup, vaccines, a heartworm test, sometimes a microchip scan. And this is where it gets interesting. Shelters check that microchip database first because nearly 1 in 3 stray dogs actually has an owner looking for them right now, but medical checks are only half the story. Next comes the part that decides everything. This is the part of the shelter process almost nobody talks about, and it might be the single biggest factor in whether a dog gets adopted or not. It's called a behavioral assessment, and most shelters use a version of something called the ASPCA's SAFER test. Safety assessment for evaluating rehoming. A trained evaluator does things like touch the dog's paws, take away a food bowl mid-meal, introduce a stuffed dog to see how they react to another animal, even do a gentle hug test to check tolerance for handling. Here's the twist. Dogs get scored, not pass or fail. A dog that growls when food is taken away isn't automatically labeled aggressive. Resource guarding is actually one of the most common and most treatable behaviors in dogs. Shelters increasingly use these scores to match dogs with the right adopters, not to weed dogs out. And this leads to a myth we need to bust right now. If you've ever heard someone say, "I don't want a shelter dog," something's probably wrong with it. I need you to unlearn that right now. According to the ASPCA, the overwhelming majority of dogs surrendered to shelters are given up for human reasons, not dog reasons. We're talking landlord restrictions, a move across states, a divorce, a new baby, financial hardship. Not because the dog did something wrong. Take pit bulls, for example, the most misunderstood dog breed in America. Despite their reputation, the American Temperament Test Society has consistently scored American Pit Bull Terriers with passing rates around 85%. That's actually higher than several so-called family-friendly breeds like beagles. The stigma, mostly media coverage and breed-specific legislation, not actual temperament data. The truth is, shelter dogs are just dogs. Ordinary dogs who had extraordinarily bad luck. Now let's talk about something people whisper about but rarely explain clearly. The difference between a kill shelter and a no-kill shelter. A no-kill shelter, by the widely used industry benchmark, saves at least 90% of the animals that come through its doors. The other 10% accounts for animals who are terminally ill or so severely aggressive that rehoming would be unsafe. A traditional open admission shelter, sometimes unfairly called a kill shelter, has to take in every single animal, no matter how full they are. That's the trade-off. No-kill shelters can be selective about intake, but municipal shelters legally cannot turn an animal away, even when they're at 150% capacity. Here's the number that matters most. According to Best Friends Animal Society, the U.S. has cut shelter euthanasia from an estimated 17 million animals per year in the 1970s, down to around 378,000 in recent tracking. That's a stunning drop. And it's almost entirely because of adoption, community outreach, and something called foster networks, which we'll get to in a second. Let's talk about what a normal day actually looks like for a dog waiting in a kennel, because it's more emotionally intense than most people realize. Shelter dogs typically spend 20-plus hours a day in a small concrete kennel. Studies published in animal behavior journals have shown that this kind of prolonged confinement raises cortisol, the stress hormone, to levels comparable to dogs experiencing genuine fear. That's why a dog that seems hyper, barky, or even standoffish in the kennel can turn into a completely different, calmer animal within 48 hours of being in a real home. Shelter staff have a name for this: kennel stress presentation. It's basically a dog's version of solitary confinement anxiety. It is not their true personality. This is exactly why more shelters are pushing foster-based adoption models instead of long-term kenneling. Programs like the ASPCA's Home to Home or local rescue foster networks pull dogs out of kennels and into real houses where potential adopters can actually see the dog's real temperament, not the stressed-out kennel version. Every shelter dog's second chance runs through an army of people most Americans never think about. Vet techs doing spay-neuter surgeries for a fraction of private clinic cost. Volunteer dog walkers who show up at 6 a.m. before work. Transport drivers who drive rescue dogs hundreds of miles from overcrowded southern shelters to adoption-hungry Northeast and West Coast cities. And foster families who take in a dog with zero guarantee they'll keep it. And it works. According to Shelter Animals Count, U.S. shelters and rescues placed close to 3.2 million dogs and cats into homes in a recent year. That's roughly one animal adopted every 10 seconds nationwide. So the next time you're scrolling through Pet Finder or walking past your local shelter, remember, that dog barking the loudest in the kennel might just be the most stressed, not the most dangerous. The quiet one in the back corner might be shutting down from fear, not aggression. And almost every single one of them is one home away from becoming a completely different dog. If this video taught you something new about shelters, do me a favor. Hit subscribe, because next week we're diving into an even wilder topic: the secret lives of America's backyard raccoons, and why wildlife experts call them tiny con artists. Trust me, you don't want to miss that one. And if you've ever adopted a shelter dog yourself, drop their name in the comments below. I want to hear every single one of them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.